Salam, salam, everyone. That means peace. Peace be with you. I hope you're doing well. It's me, Sammy, again with a discussion. And I know it had been a while. I did not have the time to do a video. But I have been meaning to. It's the thought that counts. In any case, so last we spoke, we talked about the decisions that the Allied powers were trying to come up with for the disposal of Eritrea. The disposal of Eritrea meaning what would happen with Eritrea after the conquest of Italy and after the British are after their time there is done. Meaning, what do we do with this land? What happens to it? So we had one person suggesting, we had the British saying things like this, a part of Eritrea should go to Sudan, and the other part should go to the four powers, the big four. And then another person saying that the Muslim areas that are basically adjacent to the Sudan should go with Sudan. And then the middle part of Eritrea basically would go to Tigray. So the Christian areas of Eritrea and the as well as the port of Massawa and Samhar and the Saho tribe. Samhar is so it is northwest of the Dankalia, the Afar area, and according to what I understand, the languages and perhaps the people who live there are Afar, Saho, Tigray, and Tigrinya. These four languages one would hear in the Samhar area. So that area, as well as Massawa, which I think may fall in that area, as well as the Kabasa, the highlands, would go with Tigray. And then the Dankalia would go to the allies, would go to the emperor. So they said that the Danakil should be assigned to the emperor. That was another claim that they had. They were talking about a greater Tigray state and how the British were most concerned with Ogaden. So it was all about interests. The Soviets said they'd be okay with any decision. The Soviets said they'd be okay with any decision the USA or the UK makes, as long as Soviet trusteeship over Tripolitania were to be conceded. Meaning that so Tripolitania is a western part of region. It's a western part of region. It's a western region in Libya. It's a western area in Libya. I don't know if it consists of the whole western area, but it is an area in the west, in Libya, western Libya. And the Soviets wanted that area to be surrendered to them. So they didn't care what else happened. The French said they wanted Italy to be in control of Eritrea. Now we've arrived at what is happening amongst Eritreans. What's going on with them? What do Eritreans? What's the case on the ground of Eritrea? What's happening there as far as the people are concerned? So what happens is what's about to happen, what we're going to see. So we're using Mr. Walde Jesus Ammar's book, Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees. Again, Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees. It was published in 1992, a masterpiece of a text written by a masterpiece of a man. So, if you've been watching, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome to you. Everyone gets the same welcome. So, C, Eritrean actors. A was Ethiopia, what they had to say. B was the Allied powers, what they had to say. C, what's going on in Eritrea. Now you can say Eritrea's turn. So before anything, I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. The concern in this section is to gauge to what extent the positions of the various actors affected the evolution of a sense of Eritreanism and an Eritrean entity. Again, the concern in this section is to gauge to what extent the positions of the various actors affected the evolution of a sense of Eritreanism and an Eritrean entity. A short glimpse into the Eritrean scene, noting some major social cleavages, would thus complete this survey. So, division could be the most expressive single word to describe the situation of the local forces during the entire period of Eritrea's disposal by international forces. Religion, physical geography, languages, and modes of life divided the people roughly into two cultural halves. It is true that during the Italian colonial rule, religious differences were to some extent muted. This was because, relatively speaking, the economic hardships were less severe during the previous period. So religious differences were more or less muted because of economic reasons. We'll see how that plays in. It's very interesting. It was economy. We'll see how. But it was because, relatively speaking, the economic hardships were less severe during the previous period. But starting in the mid-1940s, economic distress changed the social fabric. So when it says that the differences were muted during Italian rule, you can also find that in the fate of Italy's colonies. We mentioned that source earlier, and I forget the name of who wrote it, but the fate of Italy's colonies. That's where you can find that. Where you can also find that it is true that during the Italian colonial rule, religious differences were relatively speaking muted. So, but starting in the mid-1940s, economic distress changed the social fabric. The most authoritative source of the period witnessed that under the spur of unemployment and bad wages in the towns and land hunger in the rural districts of the plateau. The plateau is the highlands, Eritrean highlands, Hamasien, Saraya, Akluguzai, that area. So the highlands. The Christian Abyssinians came into bitter and savage conflict with their Muslim neighbors. That, in similar circumstances, they may well do so again is beyond doubt. So that, in similar circumstances, they may well do so again is beyond doubt. So what happened was, in the towns, wages were bad. In the rural areas, there was land hunger. And the Christian Abyssinians, the Christian Habasha, were not on good terms with the Muslims. With the Muslim neighbors, anyway. So who are we talking about now? Which Muslims? Is there any specific group? Let's see. So you can find that in Travaskis. That claim about what happened between the Christians and the Muslim neighbors can also be found in Travaskis. The situation, however, was favorable to the traders, was favorable to the traders and businessmen in Asmara, most of whom were either Arabs, 10,000 population in parentheses, most of whom were either Arabs or Jabarti, Kabasa Muslims. Kabasa Muslims, not Tigrinya speaking. So, because in the Kabasa there's also the Saho, but these are the Jabarti. So the traders and businessmen in Asmara, most of them were either Arabs or Jabarti, Kabasa Muslims. The economically burdened Christian Kabassans thus harbored not only jealousy, but also hatred towards the exploiters amidst them. Similarly, the Italians, who were allowed to sell their skills to the British administration of the territory, were seen as the UK authorities' favored kith and kin, blocking the Christian Kabassans' chances for economic social improvement. So, the UK authorities, they saw the Italians as kith and kin, blocking the Christian Kabesans' chances for economic and social improvement. So at this point, the British administration, they were in charge of the territory. I don't consider their rulership to be official. I don't care on how many pieces of paper with signatures on them we can find that. I don't consider them. I consider them as usurpers. So now, in any case, those British, the British administration, the Italians were seen as the UK's kith and kin, blocking the Christian Kabesans' chances for economic and social improvement. Ethiopia, supported by the Coptic Church in Eritrea, was, from the early 1940s, fanning distrust, fear, and hatred among the diverse communities in Eritrea. So Ethiopia, where it fell in all this, was that, and it was supported by the Coptic Church at the time. The Coptic Church is the Orthodox Church. It was supported by the Coptic Church at the time. It was fanning distrust, fear, and hatred among diverse communities in Eritrea. So Ethiopia also had a role that it was playing in Eritrea. It was playing its own game for its own interests. The British gave subtle help and encouragement to forces that would help them remain in Eritrea. They gave subtle help and encouragement to forces that would help them remain in Eritrea. Italy came to the stage late in the decade with generously distributed lire, their money, generously distributed lire, which added fuel to the fire. These centrifugal forces deepened internal division. So foreigners were causing furthering issues, or rather exacerbating issues inside of Eritrea. This, in general, was the economic, social, and political settling when the Eritrean question was brought up for consideration in the international fora. In a series of meetings in London and Paris during 1945 to 1946, the four powers considered a number of proposals on the disposal of the spoils of war, but agreed on none. They had a number of proposals, they agreed on none. After ratifying a peace treaty with Italy on the 10th of February 1947, in which the defeated colonial power, Italy, renounced all titles and rights to its former colonies, the Allied powers decided to send a commission of investigation to Eritrea to ascertain the wishes of the people. Really? The wishes of the people? After less than 2 months' visit to Eritrea, the commission left the territory on the 3rd of January 1948, the year Palestine was stolen. After less than 2 months' visit to Eritrea, the commission left the territory on the 3rd of January 1948, with each representative reporting back no new findings, but reinforcing its own government's predispositions as to how the problem must be settled. So all it had was, it just reinforced its own government, his own government. He just reinforced, whoever came back, the representative, would just reinforce his own government's predispositions as to how the problem must be settled. Their reports thus were not better than the Eritrean partisan claims, showing 71.1% of all the Kabesans in support of union with Ethiopia. 71.1% of the Kabesans in support of union, while 71.6% of the lowlanders opposed union with Ethiopia. You can find that in Travaskis as well. So a lot of the Highlanders at one point were unionists. When the four powers, by the 15th of September 1948, reported their failure to agree on Eritrea, the UN General Assembly, just like what's happening these days, what's been happening, the UN General Assembly took up the matter to consider a recommendation for a possible solution. The stage was set for the Assembly to decide on proposals submitted by the foreign ministers of Britain and Italy. So again, the stage was set for the assembly to decide on proposals submitted by the foreign ministers of Britain and Italy. In parentheses, the Bevan-Sforza proposals, which, among other things, suggested the partition of Eritrea between Ethiopia and the Sudan, as historian Arnold Toynbee had recommended earlier in the decade. Remember Arnold Toynbee? Okay. The first committee adopted the proposals. The first committee adopted the proposals. And it seemed reasonably certain that the assembly would accept them. But an outburst of riots in Tripolitania, again, Western Libyan area, but an outburst of riots in Tripolitania opposing Italian trusteeship changed opinions in New York. Also in Travaskis. Changed opinions in New York. So the other day, if you guys remember, I mentioned the Western lowlanders joining Sudan. The Sudan, I believe, so for me, I'm someone who appreciates the cultures and the diversity that we have in Eritrea, as well as Ethiopia, and as well as in neighboring countries. Sudan became an Arab nation. It became an Arab nation, let alone Arabized. They're Arabs, generally speaking. So to add those on the Western lowlands with the Sudan, this could Arabize the people, which already happened. This is a problem I have with Western lowlanders. And also, possibly the Jabarti. They became Arabized. This is what I've noticed, is an Arabization. I had been told by one of my uncles that my grandpa used to say, I don't know, at one point or another, or more than one point, he used to say, we're not Arabs. He was a Muslim blin. He said, we're not Arabs. I may have mentioned this earlier on in the series. We're not Arabs. I don't want my group to become Arabized. We have our own languages. We have our own cultures. And for those who think that Islam is equal to Arabization, you're wrong. You're wrong. Islam is not the same as Arabization. That may have taken place. But what if I told you that the Arabization which took place in Islam happened by the enemies of Islam? When the Umayyads first came, the Umayyad dynasty, the so-called dynasty, when the Umayyads took control after the caliphate of Al-Hasan, because Al-Hasan was caliph for 6 months before Muawiyah took it. This is a history lesson, small one for you. The Umayyads, Umayyad, Umayyayyad. The Umayyads, they were the ones who started this whole Arab nationalism thing. They were the racists. They were the ones who started this. They used to mistreat what are known as the Mawali, those who were non-Arabs. Even if they were Muslim, they used to mistreat them. You can say that there are Muslims today who have the similar behavior. So-called Muslims anyway. They have similar behavior. That's why when the Abbasids took control, who supported them? The Persians. What was a reason, in my understanding? I could be wrong, but in my understanding, a reason why the Persians supported the Abbasids is because the Umayyads were bad towards them, towards the Persians. That was a reason. The Persians hated the Umayyads. So that's what happened. They ended up winning, but the Abbasids would end up becoming oppressors themselves. So Arabization has no place in Islam except through the language. How? Because the Quran was revealed in Arabic. That's it. Quran never said, if you go to the Quran, chapter 30, verse 22, I believe it is, God talks about the differences of our colors and our tongues, languages. There is no Arabization. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned it, I think I mentioned it before, but if we go to the names. So in Tigrinya, Gabriel, the name Gabriel is Gabriel, no? Jibril in Arabic, it's Jibril. That's just the Arabized version. But what does Jibril mean? Jibril, Gabriel. Jibril, Gabriel. Gabriel means the servant of God, because Gabra means servant, Yel means God. And if you want, if any of you, if you want to go look up the name Jibril, we have narrations that say Jibr means slave. Il in Arabic is referring to God. It's the Arabized version of the Hebrew name, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Israel. Israel. Who is Israel? Jacob. Same thing with Samuel. Samuel. Some say Samuel, some say Shamuel, some say Shamuel. Something Il. I believe in his case, Samuel is God hears, meaning that God heard her. It had something to do with, I think, I'm not sure, but I forget the story. Maybe she wanted a son, and she prayed. Anyway, so I'm not sure, but there's a story. Ishmael. So, is there any problem with a Muslim naming his child Gabriel? No problem. Someone wrote as a comment on one of my the Islam that nobody told you, which I recommend you if you're especially if you're not Muslim. If you're Muslim, go and check it out. Someone commented, there is no God, there is only Allah. This person, perhaps due to ignorance, does not know that Allah means God. Amlach. Igziabhir. Amlach. God. Dios. Jar in Blaine. It's all God. Allah is just the Arabic word. If I'm not mistaken, it comes from Al-Ilah, the God. So, if you go to a Arab Christian church, they say, Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. They say Allah. I've heard a story of a Habasha woman who was in a church, and the preacher was speaking Arabic, I think. It's, I believe, an Orthodox church. Anyway, he said, I think, Alhamdulillah. And she was like, she was shocked. She had a shock. I don't know if she was Eritrean or Ethiopian, but she was kind of shocked. But then she understood that he was praising God. So Arabization has nothing to do with Islam. There is no Arabization. So if you want to help a non-Muslim understand Islam, stop Arabizing Islam and making it look like it belongs to people who are Arabs, because that's not true. That's not true. It's a spiritual religion for everyone. Well, the Quran is in Arabic. The Torah was in Hebrew. The Gospel was in Syriac. If the language of the Quran was in Cantonese, you'd be seeing us learning Cantonese to learn the word of God. The word of God in the language that it was revealed in. If it was revealed in Ge'ez, we'd be speaking Ge'ez. We'd be speaking as in to understand what the Quran is saying. We'd learn Ge'ez. If it was revealed in Saho, we'd learn Saho. If it was revealed in any language, a language nobody knows about, we'd learn that language for the sake of understanding it. But for those people who become Arabized, this is a problem. It is, because Islam has nothing to do with this. So don't sell your culture that God gave you, the trust that God gave you, for a culture. God already gave you a culture, yet you want somebody else's culture? This is a joke. My dad, who's an Arab, white guy. Okay, my dad is a white guy and is an Arab, so he said to me, he has friends who are Eritreans, but he said to me that, Eritreans, they seem like confused whether they're Arab or not. That's what he said. And he's an Arab. Of course, who he's speaking about more than likely is the Muslim lowlanders, because he knows different Eritreans, different people, Muslims and Christians, but his closer friends are the Muslim lowlanders, Not just because he's Muslim, that's just who he maybe ended up around after marrying my mom. So, but that's what he said. And this is from an Arab. So if you're being a copycat, stop it. Cut it out. In any case, so an outburst of riots in Tripolitania opposing Italian trusteeship changed opinions in New York. On the 17th of May, 1949, the General Assembly met and approved the partition of Eritrea by 37 votes to 11, with 10 abstentions. But fortunately or unfortunately for Eritrea, the procedure did not end there. Voting on the Bevin-Sforza proposals as a package, the Assembly rejected them by 37 votes to 14, with 7 abstentions. Again, but fortunately or unfortunately for Eritrea, the procedure did not end there. Voting on the Bevin-Sforza proposals as a package, the Assembly rejected them by 37 votes to 14, with 7 abstentions. This was an interesting development because the UN almost decided to partition Eritrea, while the majority of the people categorically opposed such an idea. So we see that the coalition, in the footnotes, that the coalition of parties in the independence bloc were opposed to partition. And during this time, the bloc swayed majority support in Eritrea. According to the 10th of August 1949 U.S. Embassy telegram to the State Department, based on British findings, Eritreans demanding independence constituted 75% of the people. In 1949, 75% of the people, according to British findings, 75% wanted independence. See Journal of Eritrean Studies, Volume 1, in parentheses also 1, Summer 1986, page 71. The defeat of the Bevin-Sforza plan again required a UN commission of inquiry to ascertain more fully the wishes and the best means of promoting the welfare of the inhabitants of Eritrea. The best means of promoting the welfare of the inhabitants, of our dear inhabitants of Eritrea. That's how they want it to look. And this was a part of Resolution 289, in parentheses, Roman numeral 4. GAOR, 4th session resolutions, parenthesis, A/1251, parenthesis, page 11. The UN Commission of Inquiry, consisting of representatives from Guatemala, Pakistan, Burma, South Africa, and Norway, visited the country between the 14th of February to the 6th of April 1950. So what, did they celebrate Valentine's Day or before this happened? Or I'm sorry. Sorry. It's a serious matter, but every time, it's just this plan, that plan, this commission, that commission. Anyway, the UN Commission of Inquiry, consisting of representatives from Guatemala, Pakistan, Burma, South Africa, and Norway, visited the country between the 14th of February to the 6th of April 1950. Delegates of the first two countries proposed independence. Guatemala and Pakistan said independence for Eritrea, and two others suggested a federal arrangement. Only the Norwegian delegate thought Eritrea should be united with Ethiopia. Sorry. So, delegates of the first two countries said independence. Pakistan and Guatemala said independence. The other two, Burma and South Africa, suggested a federal arrangement. Only the Norwegian delegate thought Eritrea should be united with Ethiopia. All these debates and inquiries on the future of Eritrea between 1945 to 1950 shook the fragile society to its roots and led to the politicization of the Eritrean ethnic, religious, and regional diversity. It led to the politicization of the Eritrean ethnic, religious, and regional diversity. Ehrlich, page 5. We went over a book by, I think this is Haggai. Well, it has to be. He's the only Ehrlich that I know. Haggai Ehrlich. There might be other people named Ehrlich, but Haggai Ehrlich is a well-known author who wrote about this region, the region. He has a book that just came out about Greater Tigray. Greater Tigray, the mysterious something about Ethiopia. Anyway, so Ehrlich, page 5. We'll go over the bibliography later on to talk about which sources. I believe there's a bibliography to talk about which sources Mr. Walde Jesus used, because we also we went over Haggai Ehrlich using one of his texts earlier on. Anyway, so this is what led to the politicization. So again, all these debates and inquiries on the future of Eritrea between 1945 to 1950 shook the fragile society to its roots and led to the politicization of the Eritrean ethnic, religious, and regional diversity. Adherence to political parties had mostly been by social groups and not by individuals making choices based on political ideas or socio-economic reasons. That you can find on Fate of Italy's Colonies. Fate of Italy's Colonies. That's the source. Or you can also find it there. So it was mostly by social groups, not by individuals making choices based on political ideas or socio-economic reasons. The parties which were allowed to function since late 1946, represented two major trends. Those who supported union with Ethiopia, the Unionist Party, and those who opposed it, the Muslim League, both in parentheses. So the Unionist Party and the Muslim League. Others included the Liberal Progressive Party and the New Eritrea, pro-Italy party. Both were less significant. So the Liberal Progressive Party was less significant, and the New Eritrea pro-Italy party, these were less significant than the first two mentioned. Disunity among the independentists raised the number of parties to 15. See Appendix 3. So 15 political parties. The disunity among the independentists raised the number of parties to 15. See Appendix 3, Roman numeral 3, as the case is today with the fronts. Today, I believe 1991 or 92, whenever this was written, when it was written. It was published in 1992. I don't know, I forget what month. Travaskis described the situation of the late 1940s in these terms. This is how Travaskis described it. Travaskis in the 1940s, what things were like in the 1940s. The structure of the Eritrean political unity erected during the Italian regime had concealed the fundamental conflicts of culture and interests among the Eritrean communities. Again, the structure of Eritrean political unity erected during the Italian regime had concealed the fundamental conflicts of culture and interests among the Eritrean communities. The Italian regime had the effect of anesthetizing the passions, dividing them, and had lent the lie of Eritrean unity a semblance of truth. So what the Italian thing did, see, this is important. What the Italian thing was like someone injecting, may God protect us all from any kind of issues. But it was like being numbed. Okay, it was like being numbed. the Italian regime had the effect of numbing the people to the fact that there were differences among them. And it's unfortunate that, differences can lead to problems. But that's what the Italian regime did. It had the effect of, anesthetizing the passions, dividing them, and had lent the lie, L-I-E, the lie of Eritrean unity a semblance of truth. It gave that lie a semblance of truth. It's not true that, look, we can be united as a country. We can be. It's not impossible. But the fact of the matter is that we're not united in that. We have to begin with the natural divisions. For example, we have different tribes. We have to accept that. We have to accept that there's something called Blen, and there's something called Tigre, and there's something called Tigrinya, and there's something called Saho, etc. That's first. Second, there are religions. And then you have different views. Let's continue. So that's Travaskis. Now, back to Mr. Walde Jesus's words. The question of the disposal of former Italian colonies was a decision mostly made without considering the wishes and interests of the concerned peoples. But at least some marginal influence was possible to be exerted by a united voice of a people. One could cite the case of the violent anti-Italian riots in Tripolitania. A measure of political unity could therefore have spared Eritrea the trauma of a long liberation struggle. Again, a measure of political unity could therefore have spared Eritrea the trauma of a long liberation struggle with its tragedies of mass murders, refugeeism, and displacement. Political unity could have solved this issue. 100% I agree. 100%. 30 years. Can you imagine? 30 years of fighting. Back then, there were no smartphones. There was no YouTube. There was no fast internet. There was none of that. Maybe there was fast internet. I don't know. Maybe there was in among government people. I'm not sure. But that whatever the reason why time moves so quickly these days, I don't imagine to be the case back then. And in any case, 30 years is still a long time. Okay? If 1 year has 365 days, do the math and multiply it by 30. 30 years, day and night, not with shifts, no vacations, no breaks. More than that, you don't know if you're going to live or not. I mean, nobody knows whether he's going to live or not. But in a war situation, you could die any moment. Think about these things. This is humanity. This is life. The findings of the UN Commission of Inquiry were submitted to the Interim Committee, which could not make a specific recommendation because of the joint US-UK diplomatic campaign to make their favorite solution of federation acceptable to many member states of the world body. So, what was the case? The findings of the UN Commission of Inquiry were submitted to the Interim Committee, which could not make a specific recommendation because of the joint US-UK diplomatic campaign to make their favored solution of federation acceptable. So, the US and the UK, in my understanding, their favorite solution, they had a campaign to make what they wanted, in my understanding of the text, to make what they wanted, the US and the UK, what they wanted happen, which was federation. They wanted it to be acceptable to many member states of the world body. The General Assembly later referred the matter to the Ad Hoc Committee, AD space HOC, Ad Hoc Committee, for consideration and final recommendation. 2 draft resolutions for the independence of Eritrea were tabled by the Soviet bloc countries, and by Iraq and Pakistan. The US-UK supported federal draft was sponsored by 14 states. Speaking at an ad hoc committee meeting, Ibrahim Sultan, head of the Eritrean independence bloc, said the UN was being manipulated to impose an ambiguous scheme on the Eritrean people. He said federation could exist only between independent states of equal sovereign rights and not between one independent state and the one being denied independence, which is true. How can you have they both have to be independent. You want one to be, that's what he said. You can find this in that quote, between independent states of equal sovereign rights. You can find it in Mr. Walde Jesus's text, as well as the United Nations General Assembly, 5th Session, Ad Hoc Political Committee, 27th of November, 1950, A/AC 38/L51. Okay, let's we're almost at the end, but I still think, let's see how far we can get. I know people prefer maybe shorter programs, but if we were to make them short, I don't know if it would cover enough. So it would have to be like this. But once, I would think that when people start listening, they might want to listen more if they're interested in the topic. So, okay. So that's what Ibrahim Sultan said. Saudi Arabia's representative at the ad hoc committee argued that any solution short of independence unjustly penalized the Eritrean people. Any resolution short of independence, meaning whatever is not independence, it unjustly penalizes the people, the Eritrean people. Defending the Soviet bloc proposal, the Czechoslovak delegate opposed the idea of federation in these terms. So this is what the delegate from Czechoslovakia said. Contrary to the fundamental purposes of the charter, the federation resolution in brackets, it would deny the people of Eritrea the right to self-determination and impose on them a federation with Ethiopia, which the great majority oppose. It will deny them self-determination, and it will impose the federation with Ethiopia, which the people oppose. The majority oppose. That sounds democratic to me. What he said, or what she said. I don't know if it was a he or a she. Instead of maintaining peace in that part of the world, the resolution would foster civil war and discord. Instead of assisting an oppressed and exploited people to achieve freedom and independence, it would attempt to cover up the annexation of a small state by a larger state. It would attempt to cover up the annexation of a small state by a larger state. You can find that in the previous source, United Nations General Assembly, 5th Session, Ad Hoc Political Committee, 27th of November, 1950, A/AC 38/L51. This is what the representative of Czechoslovakia said. You're going to deny the people. You see, in the text by Dr. Alam Sagad Abbay that we were reading in the sad story of Eritrea, we saw why secession was a bad idea. Here we see why secession was desired, which Dr. Alam Sagad mentioned as well, by the way, why they wanted secession. There was a reason. But you see how between these two texts, you can kind of see two good points. Dr. Alam Sagad has his point. Those who wanted independence had their point. And Dr. Alam Sagad understands that. But do you see how, unfortunately, you see, let's say that what the representative of the delegate of Czechoslovakia, let's say what he said was what he said has a point, by the way, even if it didn't happen. It still has a point. He still has a point. But let's say it didn't happen that way. Things would have been fine. No war, no struggle, hopefully, no, right? But it ended up happening anyway. And Dr. Alam Sagad said what? If you guys remember from that program, he said, he said, if only the rulers of Eritrea sat of Ethiopia, the Haile Selassie regime and the Derg regime, if only these groups that were in control of Ethiopia at one time or another, if they only did things in a peaceful manner, in a civil manner, rather than starting a fire and adding fuel to it. Basically, those are not. I don't quote him, but this is basically what he was saying. So, but you see, Ethiopia ruined it, and then they say Eritrea is part of us. If you treat people nicely and say you're one of us after you treated them nicely. If you have a guest in your house, or in your always a hummingbird, these are blessings. Learn to look at the blessings of the world. So if you see if you have a guest that you invite to your house, he accepts your invitation, and he stays, let's say he stays a few days, and he has his own house, but you say to him that, my house is your house. Let's say you have a huge house. It's a huge house. I mean, it's just gigantic. Maybe you have a whole guest house. Like you have a whole empty house, meaning meaning when he invites you, you go to his house, to where he lives, you eat, you drink, you enjoy your time with your companion. If they have kids, they play together. All of how we do things. And he has a guest house where he tells you to stay at the guest house. Huge guest house. It's just a house. It's another house. It's just empty. It's for guests. And he treats you so well, he tells you anytime you want to come, this is the house. And here's the key. You might out of respect say, no, it's okay. You might not want to do that, because, not to, disturb. But the house would still be available for you. And he means it. Are you going to have any issue with him? God willing, no. Ethiopia did the opposite. They wanted to force you to be a guest. They forced you to be a guest. They abused you as when you were a guest, and then they forced you to stay in the dungeon. There is no dungeon, but in the basement. What is this? And then you say that these people are part of you. Maybe the people are part of those people, the people as a people. Kunama, Afar, maybe them. But not your political climate. It's not safe for these people, for those people that you're talking to, that you're addressing. It's not safe for them to live in. Politics is important. Religion encompasses politics. If you oppose this, you don't know religion. You did not understand religion. So, but despite all the forceful rhetoric against the American-backed draft resolution at the various committee meetings and the General Assembly, despite all the forceful rhetoric against the American-backed draft resolution at the various committee meetings and the General Assembly, Resolution 390A (V) was passed on the 2nd of December 1950. So the resolution of the Federation was passed, despite people trying to fight against it. Well, I mean, when U.S. politicians want something, a lot of times they get it, don't they, huh? They want to fight the world, politicians. They want to fight the world. They want to start a war in Afghanistan. They get a war in Afghanistan. If they want to fight a war in Iraq, they get a war in Iraq. Whatever they want to do. You know, whatever they want to do. They want to, they're just crazy. This is crazy. Why shouldn't someone criticize the U.S. government if the U.S. government is the cause of much evil in this world? The U.S. government has a lot of blood on its hands. And then when someone else has blood on his hands, they say, oh, you have blood on your hands. Well, what about you? You're drenched in it. He's drenched in it too, but you're drenched in it just like he is. Okay, so Dr. Anze Matienzo of Bolivia was appointed to implement the decision in consultation with the Eritrean people, see Appendix 3, Roman numeral 3, and other concerned parties. So he was appointed to implement the decision in consultation with the Eritrean people and other concerned parties, including the British and the Ethiopians. At a long last, we can continue until the end of this section. At long last, the outcome was a defective structure. Nevertheless, that decision changed the status of Eritrea from an occupied enemy territory to a new federal unit under Ethiopia. Indeed, a better recipe for civil war was hard to imagine. There was no better recipe for civil war. This was it. Where else can you find this? These words, you can find the meaning that a better recipe for civil war. T. Kuhlman, or Kuhlman. T. Kuhlman, Kuhlman. T. Kuhlman, I think it's Al, because ETAL, forgive my ignorance on this matter when it comes to footnotes, ET space AL, italicized, Refugees and Regional Development. It looks to me like it's a book. Refugees and Regional Development, because it's italicized. Amsterdam, Free University of Amsterdam, published by them in my understanding, 1987, Annex X-7. So that's where you can find that. The words about, indeed, a better recipe for civil war was hard to imagine. The Americans were grooming Haile Selassie's Ethiopia as their Cold War neo-colony. Again, the Americans were grooming Haile Selassie's Ethiopia as their Cold War neo-colony. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. I don't know if it's Dulles or Dulles. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, I guess. I'll just say Dulles for now. Dulles, apostrophe at the end. So Secretary of State John Foster Dulles' famous quotation of 1952 was indeed a declaration of American policy which was to last unchanged for 41 years. He said, "From the point of view of strict justice, the opinion of the Eritrean people must receive consideration. Nevertheless, the strategic interests of the U.S. and the Red Sea Basin and world peace make it necessary that the country be linked with our ally, Ethiopia." So whose interest was this for? American interest. American political interests and British interests and whoever else's interests, are they usually good or bad? Bad. Where can you find what he said? And I will repeat what he said. The source is Report on Ethiopia, Market Intelligence Report. So it's the report on Ethiopia found in the Market Intelligence Report, Greenwich CT, maybe Connecticut CT, February 1977, page 2. Capital C, capital T. What did he say? The Secretary of State of the U.S. in 1952? It was a declaration of American policy which was to last unchanged for 41 years. 41 years, that's how long it would take. He didn't say that, but that's how long it would be from that time, because Eritrea didn't gain independence until 1991. So, yeah, so this policy of Eritrea being part of Ethiopia is what is implied. He said it in 1952 of American policy, which was to last unchanged 41 years. He said, from the point of view of strict justice, the opinion of the Eritrean people must receive consideration. Nevertheless, the strategic interests of the U.S., the United States of America, of the strategic interests of the U.S. and the Red Sea Basin and world peace. So the strategic interests of the U.S. and the Red Sea Basin and world peace make it necessary that the country be connected with our ally, Ethiopia. One time I was disputing. I remember I was just like, why doesn't Eritrea be part of Ethiopia? I was like 21. I remember that my grandpa, who was about to leave the house, he was getting ready to leave. And I never heard this claim before, never. I had an idea of politics at the time, but not about Eritrea, not much about Eritrea. But my grandpa said, it was an American Zionist, Israeli. They're not true Israelis. It's better to call them. I prefer to call them. I understand that there's a state called Israel, but I don't want to use that term because the state of Israel does things which are bad. So if the state of Israel is being named after a prophet named Jacob and they're doing these terrible things that they do, I would rather say the Zionists. So he said that it was a U.S. Zionist. I think he mentioned UK. It was their agenda. It had to do with them. When he said that, I was like, it like sparked. They wanted the ports, he said. He said, if I remember correctly, he said they wanted the ports, Masawa and Asab, if I'm not mistaken. That's what he said. He said it was their interests. It was in their interests. Those of you who think that the Zionist issue is restricted to Arabs or Muslims, you are terribly wrong. Terribly wrong. You are way wrong. If you're Eritrean or Ethiopian, and you think that this is an Arab issue or a Muslim issue, you are wrong. You are wrong, very wrong. The whole reason Eritrea is bad is because of the Zionists. Did you know that when they were fighting the war, that they would capture? I know they captured at least one. I say one spy who was working for the Zionists. What's their business in Eritrea? So the Zionist agenda is one that is seeking to control the world, not just Palestine. It's not just about Palestine, it's the whole entire world. How the system works. The system is controlled by Zionists. Who's holding the remote control? Who's holding the joystick? Who's controlling everything? It's the Zionists. So don't you dare think that, this is an Arab problem, this is a Muslim problem, because they're the ones that are being affected that we see with our eyes on the news or wherever. No. You have to dig a bit deeper. It's affecting everyone. Do you not see that American tax dollars, the United States, the tax dollars, America has a problem of hunger. There is a hunger issue. There is a housing crisis. There are many different crises faced here. Okay? Many different crises here in the United States. I'm thankful to be from the United States. I'm a proud American. I'm a proud American, meaning that I'm proud to be from this land. This land feeds me. This land clothes me. This land shelters me. I'm proud to be from here. If I was born in some other nation, I would be proud to be from there. I'm a proud American. But I'm not proud of my government. I don't have to be proud of my government. So, where do the tax dollars go? And I had said this before I started hearing people mention it. Tax dollars go to to abuse of foreign people. When we were in middle school, back before the Iraq War and before the war in Afghanistan, what were teachers talking to us about? Budget cuts. They would cut the budget. The budget would be cut for schools to go to war, to fund war. All those airplanes and bombs and weapons these are used to kill innocent people. This is war. This is for war. The people here suffered while war was going on. During Bush's time, Bush tricked the people, fooled the American people into believing that he was fighting a war on terror, which there is something called terrorists. I'm not saying there's no such thing as a terrorist. But what the U.S. did and what Al-Qaeda did was the same thing. What's the difference? Both of them are killing people. Both are killers. So the tax dollars, until now, where do they go? They fund the Zionists. They fund them. The money's going there. It's supposed to stay here. It's supposed to go to schools. It's supposed to feed people. It's supposed to help people. It's supposed to go to hospitals. It's supposed to go to the social system. It doesn't. People on the street. You want to know what I saw behind the federal building in the city of San Francisco one time? San Francisco is a beautiful city. Do you know what I saw though? Behind a federal building, the FBI building, behind it, just behind it, there's an alley and then there's another building. It's not the FBI building, the other one. There's the FBI building and then there's another building. In the alley, I'm not making this up. I had a picture of this. There was a man doing heroin. He's shooting heroin. They even have a box, by the way, for people to dispose of their needles. It was in the Tenderloin district, that area. This is a place behind which you find inside the building, inside of which you find the picture of the President of the United States. At that time, it was, I think it was Trump. Yeah, it was Trump at that time. I think it was Trump. Yeah, it was Trump. But still, even during Obama's time, same thing was going on, if I'm not mistaken. There's drugs. Where do they come from? How did that guy get it? Does he grow opium somewhere in the Tenderloin? Where does it come from? And why is it allowed to come in? Behind an FBI building. I'm not saying get this guy in trouble. No, the guy looked like we say miskeen, someone who's deprived. But take the drug away from him. They don't help people in the Tenderloin. FBI building's right there. So you want Operation Iraqi? They called it first Operation Iraqi Liberation, isn't it? Isn't that what happened? Oil. It spells oil. So then they changed it to Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? Operation Iraqi Freedom, no problem. Free the people of Iraq. But what about the people here? They have their own issues too. Of course, everywhere has issues. Of course, everywhere has issues. But that's an issue too. So these agendas that exist, they're to serve colonial interests against the interests of people like you and me. It's very sad. It's very sad indeed. Very sad. What's the solution? Well, the best solution is boycott. Boycott. That's all I can think about. The thing is, though, if you boycott, what are you going to be left with? If you boycott food, if you boycott clothes, you're going to be you're going to be naked and hungry. America says you could talk about us all you want. We don't care. At the end of the day, you're still going to buy stuff that supports us. At the end of the day, you're still going to pay taxes. So, the American position was perfectly in line with Emperor Haile Selassie's memo of the 10th of March 1949 to the State Department promising USA military facilities in Eritrea, but only after that area has been ceded to Ethiopia, after that area has been made a part of Ethiopia. Then you guys can have military facilities where? In Eritrea. What's the source where you can find this? Where can we find this? Besides Mr. Walde Jesus' text, you can find it. It's quoted by Barakat Habte Selassie, the Eritrean Question in International Law. Horn of Africa, perhaps the name of the journal, volume 6, in parentheses 2, page 25. Few could miss the point. It was a naked ploy it was a naked ploy like that over Palestine. America was acting on clear political expediency, sacrificing both justice and the opinion of the Eritrean people in exchange for military advantages in its Cold War strategies. It was for Cold War strategies. It's just a ploy like that of Palestine. It's just for interests, political interests. As I said, I'm proud to be an American. This is the land I grew up here. This is the land I'm in. I'm proud of my roots without abandoning my roots. Don't get it wrong. I don't abandon my roots. I'm proud to be an American. But I'm not proud of my government. I'm not proud of the system. And I don't have to be. And many people are not proud of that system. It has to be justice for all. Not taking people who you say are illegal immigrants and then sending them back. Who is here? What is an immigrant anyway? Everyone is an immigrant in one way, shape, or form. Anyways, so the world needs God. That's what the world needs. It needs God. You want my answer? You want my solution? It needs God. It needs wisdom, spiritual wisdom. Otherwise, it's going to go in all directions. Satan will give the commands and it will do the action. That's how it works. You have your own self that commands you to do evil, and then you have Satan too. That's what they do. They're Satan worshipers. They're pharaohs. They're a bunch of pharaohs. These political people. This is how it had to do with Eritrea. All right, guys. So yes, this was a long program, but I hope it got people's interest. But next we go into chapter 3. Chapter 3, Salaste, means 3 in Tigrinya. Federation, prelude to war of liberation. Federation, prelude to war of liberation. Chapter 3. Okay. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for joining. Keep safe always. I hope you guys are learning something. If any of you guys, by the way, is following the Tigrinya program, the reason why it's not going to cease. What happened is that there are some corrections that I'm making. Corrections on the certain pronunciations and certain corrections that I'm making for mistakes that have happened in the lessons. Not many mistakes, just making corrections on that. So that's all I'm doing. I just want to anyway, that's what's happening. So it should be back up and running tomorrow, God willing. tomorrow I should have a new video uploaded, God willing. Okay, in any case, keep safe, and I'll see you next time, God willing. Thank you for watching.